What's going on, everybody? Anthony Servino here with the Face Off Sports Network with my top starts and sits at the running back position for NFL Week 9. But before we get into the action, let's look how the Week 8 edition fared. And pretty solid when it comes to the players I told you to start. DeAndre Swift, 18.9. James Conner, 14.9 PPR points. Kareem Hunt, 13.9. When it comes to the players I told you to sit, not too great. Ram Stevenson, I didn't see this coming against the New York Football Jets. 23.5 PPR points, but this is Ram Stevenson. 1 week, he can be absolutely erased and game scripted out. The next week, it doesn't really matter the matchup. Ram Stevenson can get going. So, lesson learned. Ram Stevenson, when you think you should sit him, you might have to put him into your starting lineup. Tony Pollard, 14.7. This is one where I didn't really trust the offensive situation. The matchup wasn't great, but Pollard has been pretty solid all year long. Didn't exactly pop, but 14.7 PPR points is a good day. And then Alexander Madison, I told you to sit him 9.4 PPR points. Very average day, which was my expectation out of Alexander Madison. So we did well on the starts, didn't do well on the sits. But as always, I like to be accountable. And as always, we need to get better this week in week 9. And let's win some fantasy football matchups. And we're going to start with the first player, and that is Tony Pollard. Told you to sit him last week. Well, I'm starting him this week. Just told you, 14.7 PPR points, Detroit Lions, second most difficult matchup for enemy running backs. Catches 3 or 4 targets for 23 yards, takes 20 carries for 94 yards. Really nice day, over 110 total yards of total offense. Right now, Pollard, he's all over the place. He's getting 19.3 touches per game. He's averaging 66.6 of his yards are after contact, and he's getting 13.3% of his team targets, which is a number that could increase now that we know DeAndre Hopkins is no longer in town. The quarterback position is really suspect with this offense. So this offense is Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard is this offense. And yes, he might face stacked boxes, but we know Tony Pollard's a fantastic running back, and what a week to use him. Getting the New England Patriots. And New England's defense, it has a lot of holes in it, especially when it comes to defending enemy running backs. This is no longer the Belichickian Patriots defense where you couldn't run on them. You can run on the current edition of the Gerard Mayo Patriots. They are getting smashed and gashed right now. They're giving up the third most PPR points to enemy running backs at the moment. Now, they managed to bottle up Breece Hall last week, but in the 2 games prior, in week 6 and week 7, Mixon and Bigsby over 23 PPR points apiece. We saw Mason earlier this year go over 24 PPR points. So running backs have fared well. In fact, in the past 3 weeks, the New England Patriots are allowing 38.6% more PPR points to the running back position than the NFL average. New England giving up 31.8 PPR points in the past 3 games on average, while the NFL average is 23 points. We are starting Tony Pollard. Let's go to my next one. I'm going right back to the DeAndre Swift well. DeAndre Swift, after a pedestrian start, people thought he was losing his job to Roschon Johnson. DeAndre Swift has been on fire. 4 straight games, over 18.9 PPR points, and that was his number last week, which was a low since week 3. 3 games, over 20 PPR points. He's getting volume. He's electric. He ran for over 129 yards last week on 18 carries. What hurt DeAndre Swift, while he scored, he did not see a target for the first time this year. And he's been a high target volume running back from weeks 2 to week 6. Every game, he's had at least 4 targets but 1. Speaking of volume, he is averaging 18.3 touches per game. He's getting 11.2% of his team targets with an 82.6% catch rate, and he's averaging 11.6 yards after the catch, and that's just puzzling because Swift has been so damn good as a receiver out of the backfield. Maybe that played a role on why the Chicago Bears lost this week, because he was running really well. He was having an electric football game. And for them to not include him in the game script as a receiver, I think that really set this offense back a little bit. But we're going to continue to attack DeAndre Swift in his upcoming matchup, a nice bounce back spot against the Arizona Cardinals. This is another Swiss cheese defense. You can run the ball. We know last week combined, Achane and Mostert, I believe, had 3 total touchdowns. We know Achane went ballistic on the ground and as a receiver. And this Cardinals defense just isn't good. This is a first-place team, but a lot of it is, hey, they're going to have to score to stay in and win football games. Defensively is a work in progress. Last week, Achane 26, Mostert 16. We've seen running backs like Jeremy McNichols go off for 20, David Montgomery and Gibbs with 21 and 16 back in week 3. So running backs throughout the year have been popping in this matchup. In the past 5 weeks, the Arizona Cardinals allowing 20% more PPR points on average compared to the NFL average. So 21.5 points per game to the running back position in the last 5. The NFL average 22.9. I like those numbers, and I like this spot for DeAndre Swift. Next up, we are going to Kareem Hunt. I'm going to continue riding this hog, at least until Isaiah Pacheco comes back, because Hunt's been pretty damn good. Now, last week, underperformed. While he did give us 13.3 PPR points, he did get volume, going 21 rushes for 59 yards and a score. It was a letdown because this was a really nice smash spot for Kareem Hunt. Instead, we see Travis Kelce come alive on National Tight Ends Day. Great. I'm going to continue to go Kareem Hunt here. Hunt, since returning to the league in week 4, double-digit PPR points in every game, going for over 20 PPR points once back in week 7 in a tough matchup against the San Francisco 49ers. Now we get a smash spot against Tampa this week, who is another team that gets smashed and gashed at the running back position, but Hunt gets volume. We just talked about the volume that Swift and Pollard get. Hunt is getting 22.5 touches per game. This guy was bagging groceries earlier this year on the street, comes in, and he's getting immense volume. 57.7% of Kareem Hunt's snaps are with a touch. What does that mean? He is 95th percentile amongst qualifying running backs using the tools and metrics at rotowire.com. In fact, those 22.5 touches per game, that is 98th percentile. They have a metric called rushing touchdown rate. Every 4.8% of his carries, he is scoring a touchdown. He's also getting it done as a receiver with an 85.7% catch rate and averaging 9 yards after the catch. He's not getting a lot of reception opportunities, but when he does, we know Kareem Hunt is extremely valuable with the football in his hands out of the backfield as a receiver. Let's go to this Tampa matchup, and why do I love it? Well, Tampa's defense, it's been bad. And you know, as bad as they've been over the top, and their secondary is just getting mauled. They're getting mauled on the ground as well. In fact, the past 2 games, we have seen Bijan Robinson and Derrick Henry go for over 22 PPR points. We even saw Justice Hill in that Henry game go for 13.8. This is a defense that is getting worse against the run as the season goes on. And they're getting gashed by teams that like to run the football. We know Kansas City likes to run the football. I am absolutely attacking this matchup with Kareem Hunt. Now, if you like content like this, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and the notification icon so you can be notified anytime we are live to answer your questions, which is like every day almost, or when we drop content just like this, which is every day almost. If you have a start sit question, waiver wire question, or a trade question, asked it in the comments below. Myself or one of my team members will get back to you as soon as we can. Now, let's start closing this out with my players to sit. Javonte Williams. We were sitting Javonte Williams. He's had a few spots this year where he looked good, notably against the Saints. Everybody cracks the Saints in week 7. He goes off for 26.1. He looks like the second coming. But he follows that up with 9.2 PPR points against the Panthers. The Panthers, the easiest matchup for running backs, the Panthers. And Javonte Williams is invisible. 17 for 44, inefficient, 4 or 5 targets for 8 yards. Those PPR points saved his ass for his fantasy managers for a respectable day. He had 3 red zone carries, including 2 inside the 5, and he couldn't punch it in. This is just Javonte Williams, folks. He is hard to trust. Now you go from a really, really easy, the easiest matchup, and now we go to Baltimore. One of the toughest matchups on paper. I am fading Javonte Williams this week, and here's a hint. For next week's video, we're going to fade Javonte again as he gets the number 1 defense against enemy running backs, the Chiefs. So expect to see Javonte next week if you come back. But I'm out on Javonte this week. Baltimore, they don't give up a ton to enemy running backs. Now, you can smash them through the air. We know that secondary is suspect as hell. But when it comes to the running back position, they've been respectable this year. Now, 2 weeks ago in week 7, we see the inflated number of Rachaad White goes for almost 30 PPR points. Bucky goes for over 16.7. They were extremely involved because that was the game that Evans and Godwin went down. And a lot of White's damage came as a receiver. In fact, Bucky Irving, too. They combined for 9 receptions, 2 touchdowns, and over 100 yards receiving. That's the anomaly. Baltimore's defense isn't that bad. We are sitting Javonte Williams. Another sit, Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb has been back 2 games. And the first game coming back, solid 10 PPR points. He scored a rushing touchdown. In fact, I bet him that week. Cincy's defense, a little bit leaky against the running back position. Plus, you figured they're going to get Chubb to touchdown. He got the aforementioned Baltimore defense last week in a game that was a shootout. It was a shootout that Baltimore lost, but Cleveland won that game because of Jameis Winston, not so much Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb did get more volume, did play more snaps, goes from 27 to 41, 11 carries to 16 last week, 22 yards to 52, but he does not score. He also fails to haul in either one of his targets out of the backfield. Chubb 2 games this year is averaging 14 touches per game. He's averaging 94.6% of his yards after contact, but I don't know if Cleveland's ready to fully unleash him. I do think they want to get him a little bit more acclimated, and that scares me because Nick Chubb, without a full workload and a full workload for Nick Chubb, 18 to 20 touches, do we trust him to give us Nick Chubb production, especially in a bad matchup this week against the Chargers? I'm going to say no. This Chargers defense is one of the best in the league at doing everything. They do a lot of things right. They're really stingy against the pass, but they're equally as stingy, I would say, against enemy running backs. We've seen back-to-back weeks a little bit more leaky with James Conner and Kamara going for at least 17 PPR points apiece. But these are more so running backs when it comes to Kamara and Conner who can also catch the ball out of the backfield. In fact, Conner goes 2 for 51, Kamara 6 for 55. We know Chubb isn't a strong receiver out of the backfield. If you take that element away, I think that limits and caps his upside and makes Nick Chubb a touchdown-dependent fantasy asset against a Chargers defense in the past 3 games. They're giving up 16.7 PPR points per game. The NFL average is 23, so they're a differential of minus 27.1%. This is a stingy-ass defense. We're sitting Nick Chubb. Final player to sit, J.K. Dobbins, who has been erratic this year. Even in good matchups, we've seen him underperform, notably 2 weeks ago, Monday Night Football against Arizona. Last week, good matchup against the Saints. He bounces back with 16.8. He is still getting volume. The efficiency is okay. He's actually getting a little bit more busy as a receiver out of the backfield. I know people don't view Dobbins as a strong receiver, but he's had multiple games this year. In fact, 5 games this year with at least 3 targets, which is a lot for him. And in fact, he's had the same amount of games, 5, with at least 3 receptions. That's a lot for J.K. Dobbins, and that's okay for a high floor. But in order for us to get the ceiling of J.K. Dobbins, or at least a respectable RP2 day, he either needs to pop for the yards or he needs to score. And I don't see him doing either one of that in this matchup against the Cleveland Browns. This team's a mess. They seem to be ascending and playing with the spark with Jameis Winston, but defensively, they are very vulnerable against the pass, but they are simply outstanding against the run. They are one of the best defenses against the run when it comes to their past 3 games. The Cleveland Browns against enemy running backs, they're giving 13.9 points per game. The NFL average is 23. That's minus 39.6% differential. They've plugged up in the past 5 games, only 2 players over double-digit PPR points. They bottled up Madison, Barkley, and Chase Brown. They held Derrick Henry, who's been absolutely phenomenal, to 14. Brian Robinson, who's been pretty damn solid this year, to 13. So this Browns defense, while it was a little bit leaky earlier this season, their front 7 is shutting down running backs. We are sitting J.K. Dobbins in week 9.